Hello everyone, welcome back to the airport in the Aurelia city in City Skylines. We started building the airport in the last episode with the terminal. We finished one side with all the infrastructure and details and so on. Today we will complete the second wing of the terminal and we will also add tram and bus stations near the main building, so let's go do it. I'm going to start with the second half of the main building of the terminal. That's of course the orange one right there in the middle of the entire complex. Now, it's supposed to be symmetrical, or the infrastructure, the roads around the orange building are supposed to be symmetrical. So the easiest way to do this is simply selecting all the stuff that we have built in the previous episode, minus some details here and there, and just mirroring it with Move It. As you can see, very easy to do this. Now, it was not all that super simple like this, because there is of course the problem of left and right paths or lanes on roads. So I had to actually just reorganize it in this part, because now we will have to have some of roads that were like exit roads from the entrance to the terminal. They will now have to be entrance roads, and obviously the other way around for the exits and so on. So that was a bit of a problem. At first I thought that it's going to be like super symmetrical, everything is going to be symmetrical, and I kind of kept the roads symmetrical. I just turned them around basically, because I didn't really want to do any super different solutions for the second half of the terminal. So I finally decided that traffic is basically going to enter from the opposite way. It's not going to be so that cars will first go around the entrance and then kind of loop back, but they will now go directly to the entrance, and if they want to leave it back to the roundabout, the center roundabouts, they will have to loop around. So it's exactly the opposite way of how it is on the opposite side, but like I said, I just wanted to keep it symmetrical in terms of geometry of the roads, but it's obviously impossible to keep it symmetrical in terms of the traffic directions, right? Directions, yes, that's the word I was looking for before. Anyway, as you could have seen, I only kept the roads right next to the orange building, but all the offices and all those things I deleted from this second half. I don't want those to be completely symmetrical and completely the same as on the other side. This side, this wing of the terminal, is slightly larger because it has those terminal buildings, the white terminal buildings. It has 3 of them on this side. On the opposite side, it only has 2. I intentionally wanted to have this terminal somewhat symmetrical somewhere around the orange building, for example, but in some places I don't want to have it symmetrical. I just don't feel like that's going to be all that nice to have it symmetrical like absolutely everywhere. All right. Now, I'm going to start doing some of these office or hotel, whatever kind of buildings in here. So they are the same buildings as on the other side, but they are just placed differently. All these intersections are slightly different, and there's also that center roundabout where this road ends. It's not really ending there, it's just continuing in a different angle, but doing those different angles, I just wanted to connect them using some kind of a circle like that, because circles are kind of a common theme for the entire terminal building. As you could have seen there, for example, the kind of joints between the white long terminal buildings are also made out of those circular buildings with the orange roofs. So it kind of makes sense that every time I'm going to change angles into like non-90-degree angles, I'm going to use some kind of circles in this design. So I'm also doing these pedestrian paths. I think I can already spoil it that these paths are actually going to continue more towards the river, and I want to create some kind of a ferry terminal, ferry stop, which is also going to connect with the airport. So basically the airport is going to have every single mode of transport, public transport, just around it, going towards the airport. So that's going to be kind of cool. I think I wanted to actually do the ferry transport for today's episode, but it proved to be a slightly disconnected project from the airport, so I'm probably going to keep it for later. But right now we're just going to focus on these places, and we still have a lot of things to do here, so don't worry about that. All right, so finishing up with some of these buildings in this office area. Now, like I said, this place is larger than the opposite side, but I don't really want to fill it with just these office buildings because I'm using three kinds or four kinds of different office buildings in here. So that's not a lot. That's quite small selection of buildings, so they kind of look very repetitive at some number of buildings, or when I have some number of buildings in here, it's starting to look kind of silly. So I decided to keep this place actually smaller somewhat than it could have been. It's still larger than on the opposite side of the airport, but not much. All right. So that's going to be all. I just completed the edge of this office area with some kind of curved roads, and then the outer edges I filled with the trees, exactly like on the opposite side. And you will see that in the cinematics that, at least I think so, that it turned out looking really good, having the airport really green around the edges. So that's nice. Now, finishing just some of these roads, these connections, as you can see, I'm using, again, the same exact style of paths through this entire place. So this place is going to be very walkable. There's obviously going to be the shuttle buses going through the entire area, but people can easily just walk around without any issues. I'm using those paths to also mark the crosswalks through this place, so we can have just people having some kind of like wider crosswalks. I'm later going to make them functional. Right now, I didn't really bother because the airport is well, it's not really an airport right now. It's just a terminal, so there's not that many people just walking around these places. So I didn't really bother putting the pedestrian connections, invisible pedestrian connections, absolutely everywhere, especially through the buildings and stuff, through the terminal buildings and stuff. So like I said, there's not that many people walking around, so it's not really necessary to do it right now. So we finished that, and now we are moving back towards that main orange building, the main center building for the terminal. And with the roundabout, I decided to do something different. First, I wanted to just fill it with some trees or something, and then it occurred to me that I completely forgot about trams, putting some trams near the airport. It's not really like I forgot. I just didn't think that I'm going to do trams towards the airport, but it became kind of clear that airport needs to have these trams in here as well. There's obviously the train transporting people from the center of the city, from the downtown, right from that main train station, but from some other parts of the city, we might also have some different connections to the airport. Buses, of course, there's going to be a bus terminal as well, but trams are, not a bad idea. So a perfect spot for this tram station is going to be inside this double roundabout. As you can see, we are going to end up having 4 different levels in this place. We are going to have the bottom for the trams and the top for this pedestrian path. I'm reworking this pedestrian path. Last time we built it so it goes parallel to the train tracks all the way to the orange building, but right now I'm making it so it goes over the road, kind of around this entire place. The reason for that is very simple. I just wanted to have these pedestrian paths not obstruct the view into the tram station, right? So this is just going to be much better. Now, the tracks that I'm using down in the tram station are the tracks that I'm using in the Altengrad series. Those are the tracks that I custom made in the road editor, or customized in the road editor, so that the intersections are wider and the curve radii for the curves in those intersections are much higher. This is going to result in nicer movement of the trams. They're not going to bend unrealistically that much, and it's just going to look much better. These tracks don't have the power cables, and I didn't bother putting the power cables in here manually, just like I do in the Altengrad series, for example, because I already did it in different parts of Aurelia, where I simply said that these trams that I'm using can also run on batteries on some like shorter segments, and they're just going to recharge on the normal segments where there are the cables. But in some places, we just don't want to have the cables because they might not look that great. They might obstruct the view of the place, or, I just didn't want to do them or something like that, right? But in this place, I think that the cables would really ruin the view. So that's the reasoning behind this, behind not putting the power cables in here. So the trams are just going to do the battery operation in here. So how exactly is this station going to work? It's basically a loop. and it's going to be a terminus station for 2 lines. That's why I have those 2 entrances from different sides of into the airport, from different parts of the city, and that's why the loop is made of 2 tracks, so that one track is going to serve one line and the other track is going to serve the other one. Now, just like with the Altengrad loop that we did not so long ago, this loop is also going to be built just like a normal road, which means that it's not one way, but each track is going different direction. Now, there is a purpose for this because just like with the Altengrad series, I'm considering all my trams to be asymmetrical, which means they only have doors on one side, on the right side, of course. I'm making sure that anywhere in the city this is maintained, that all trams are actually having the station, the stops, so that people are going to get off on the right side. So that's the reason why I can't, for example, use the vanilla medium road for the trams, because they have the center median, and obviously people would need to get off on the left side. I'm obviously in right-handed traffic in here. All right, so that's the reason behind all these loops that I'm building. That's the reason for double tracks, so they can serve multiple lines, and that's the reason for not having one direction only in these loops. All right, I think I explained it quite sufficiently. So let's continue. Now, what I'm doing in here is just improving some of the detailing around the railroad. And now we are going to do for the railroad some pillars. And this is going to be exactly the same technique that I did in the previous episode for the orange circles that I put on some roofs of those buildings. I extracted the texture for that orange building with the mod tools. And, I didn't extract just the orange color, I just extracted everything, which means also all these different colors, for example, this red color from the pillars. And I decided to, again, use procedural object cylinder in this case, and just paint it with the same texture as those pillars. So that's exactly going to match. And I'm going to use those pillars for the railroad as well. It's kind of a shame that I couldn't do it, for example, that green outline of the railroad. That would be really awesome if I could do it maybe in orange color or maybe completely white, or this red. That would be also quite interesting. But I can at least do these pillars, which definitely looks much better. So I decided to use just the vertical pillars through the tram station, and in here in this place I'm just going to connect those pillars for the building with these horizontal beams. And reason for that is also simple, because that's the place where we are going to build the bus terminal, or, well, not really a terminal, it's just going to be a bus stop station, something like that. So like I said, we are going to have this loop so that it's going to go both directions, and that's going to inevitably lead to some asymmetrical design for this entire place. And that's not a bad thing. That's actually what I kind of wanted. I didn't really want it to have symmetry absolutely everywhere, just like I explained with the office buildings. So that's exactly what's going to end up being in here. We are going to cover this place with glass, and in this place I'm just going to extend the glass slightly forward, and just to cover that portion of the stop. I think you will see that in the cinematics where exactly the stops are. I think I'm actually going to detail some benches in as well, so it's going to be more visible, or just more clearer, right? Also putting some of these decorations in here, so we are completely going to finish this tram station before moving on. So lots of green around this place, lots of different trees and flowers, and just, all kinds of details like that. And now we're finally moving towards that bus station. So just like with the tram station, I said that I wanted to build those pedestrian paths on top so that they would not obstruct the view. Now, unfortunately, the bus stop is much smaller than the tram station, and there is that railroad going right on top of it. And there's just no other way I can do the railroad, because the station is already built and, it's just set how it needs to be. so I cannot move it. So we will have to just work underneath all the things that we have on the top right here. So it might be maybe a bit more confusing how I'm doing this stuff. There's always going to be something just blocking the view, right? I think even in the cinematics, it's going to be a bit of a problem, and I had to do some kind of like a static shot from very low angles to actually see underneath all this detailing and all these things on the top to see what's inside. But in the end, I think it turned out looking good to have some kind of a project that's not exactly visible, that might be even covered with something. It just adds more verticality to this entire project, maybe we can call it that way. But anyway, what's happening in here? How's the bus station going to work? So it's not really like a huge bus terminal, some kind of a super big station. It's going to be basically just a stop where buses are going to terminate again. They are just going to make people get off the bus on one side of this place where they enter, right when they enter. Then they are going to loop around and pick up people who want to go from the airport into the city. I haven't yet decided which lines this is going to be for the buses, of course. Where exactly are they going to go? I would assume that this station is going to be for buses that go into some more remote areas of the city, because the more downtowny areas are going to be served by the train primarily and the trams. So I suppose that these buses are just going to go into some suburbs maybe or something like that. Basically places that are not served by trains or trams. So I made this place with only the narrow roads, narrow 2-lane roads that don't have any kind of parking spaces or anything like that. And I detailed in this place on one side of it for basically like short-term parking for the buses. I guess between, at the end of the line, they are just going to park there, I guess. The driver is going to be having a lunch or something, I don't know. And I only have it on one side. Again, it's kind of an asymmetrical design for the bus stop, just like with the tram station, but I think it's really looking good. It definitely is working in this place. And again, covering it with glass, just so people are not going to get wet when it's raining. Doing some traffic detailing in front, because this is directly connected to the lower roundabout. So doing some kind of detailing in here, basically in this tiny segment between the entrance and the exit. I'm making sure that one lane is not used, so that there's going to be a dedicated turning lane and like entering lane into this place. Later with Traffic Manager, I'm going to put very important lane connections in this place, so that people are actually going to respect these markings in here. Okay, so this entire place is not going to be detailed all that heavily. I'm not really going to bother with that many arrows or some kind of signs for the buses or something, because this bus station is going to be only for buses. Like only buses can enter this place, and I suppose that the drivers have very good knowledge of where they need to stop and all that, so it's not really necessary to paint absolutely everything down here. We need to make sure that obviously this place is going to have a purpose, so that there's going to be these doors entering and exiting the terminal building. Later, like I explained before, we are going to put some pedestrian connections all around this complex, so that this place is going to get quite busy, hopefully. So detailing with some stop signs and some benches, and making sure that these pedestrian paths on the top here are actually going to have a purpose, and they're going to enter the building as well. And just like with the lowest level, like I did those doors in there, I'm going to do the same thing on the top right here, as you can see. Just going to put a couple of doors in here, and later just some fake pedestrian entrances, or well, actually not fake, but functional pedestrian connections. But we are going to do that in some future episodes, like I explained. This is very important. This is going to mark the operation of the entire bus terminal. You will see that in the cinematic how it's going to work. But basically, what I did there is that the straight segment on one side of the bus terminal is going to be divided in two. And there's going to be two lines again, just like with the tram stop. There will be two lines going into the bus terminal. And one line is going to have stops on one segment, and the other line is going to have it on the second segment. And I specifically made that place with 2-lane one-way roads so that one bus is going to bypass the other bus if it's right now in the station, in the stop. So that's kind of a problem with City Skylines bus stops. For example, if you do it for multiple lines, one stop for multiple lines, then in real life the stop would usually be longer so that buses can stop, behind each other and just, open the doors and people can go in and out. But obviously not in City Skylines. So this is kind of a way to bypass that behavior, to make 2 stops, but force the buses with the traffic manager to just go around each other into those stops. And you will of course see that again in the cinematics in just a couple of seconds because we are at the end of today's video anyway. So guys, thank you for watching the second part of building the airport in Aurelia. I hope you liked this video. If you did, then you can always put a thumbs up below the video. You can share the video if you like, and you can subscribe to the channel if you're new here. And if you really want to support this channel, you can become a channel member by clicking the join button below. Huge thanks to all of you guys who already did. So anyway, thank you again for watching. Take care and goodbye.